fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver, the Lone Ranger. With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early western United States. Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. From out of the past come the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse Silver. The Lone Ranger rides again.
Come on, Silver. Let's go, big fella. Hi-yo, Silver! Hi!
After many days of travel, the Lone Ranger and Tonto rode into a woods near the town of Panamint. Darkness was gathering by the time they found a favorable campsite near a running stream.
We'll stop here, Tonto. Oh, Silver.
Oh, Scout. Oh, fella. Easy, Scout. Easy, fella. This plenty good place to stop.
Easy, steady, Silver. Set up the camp while I go to town, Tonto. I'll untie my blanket roll and leave it with you.
Uh-huh.
I'll be back after I speak to Sheriff Burton.
You know where him live?
Yes, he lives alone at the edge of town. I had a visit with him a couple of years ago. There. Here's the blanket roll. I'll return as soon as possible.
We have camp ready.
Easy, steady, big fellow. Come on, Silver!
It was about 30 minutes later when the Lone Ranger brought his great horse Silver to a halt in the darkness behind the small home of the sheriff.
Oh, Silver. Oh, easy, steady, big fellow.
He dismounted and rapped on the back door. Much to his surprise, a woman's voice responded.
Just a minute.
Maybe the sheriff's married. Good evening.
You're Max.
Please don't be alarmed. I'm a friend of Sheriff Burton.
What do you want?
I'd like to speak to the sheriff.
You can't.
Well, Jim Burton is my friend. I've traveled a long way to see him. Are you Mrs. Burton?
No, I'm Miss Burton. I'm Jim's sister, and I don't know where my brother is. If you have official business, you'll have to see the deputy.
I'm sorry, Miss Burton, but my business is with the sheriff. I wrote and told him I'd be here. I'm sure he expects me.
I told you he's not here, and I don't know where he is. Now, will you please go?
Jim may have spoken to you about me. He calls me the Lone Ranger.
The Lone Ranger?
Yes. The last time I saw him, I gave him a silver bullet. Like this one.
What? He showed me the bullet. He told me about you and your white horse.
Silver's standing right over there. You can barely see him in the darkness.
My brother said he would trust you with his life.
Where is he, Miss Burton?
I don't know.
Please trust me.
I do trust you. But I can't tell you where Jim is. You'd better step inside.
Oh, thanks. I didn't know Jim had a sister.
I lived in the East until a few months ago when I came here to teach in the Panamint school. Oh, please sit down.
Thank you.
I'll tell you all I know about my brother. He left here the day before yesterday, early in the morning, to ride to Pine City. That's about a half-day ride to the south.
I know where it is.
He said he'd be back for supper on the same day. When he didn't arrive, I thought he'd been delayed and decided to stay overnight in Pine City. All day yesterday I expected to see him or to hear from him, but there's been no word. I'm worried. I'm sure something has happened to him.
Did he say why he left for Pine City?
Yes, it was to get evidence against a crook. He said he'd return with evidence to jail the biggest crook in this part of the country.
John Sterling?
What? Yes. Do you know John Sterling?
I've heard of him. He lives here in Panamint, doesn't he?
He lives on a ranch outside of town. He owns the Panamint Cafe and the hotel and a lot of other property. And my brother is sure that he used crooked means to get it.
Crooked means?
Yes, crooked games in his cafe. Men lose their money, get into debt to Sterling, then sign over their property to him.
Couldn't those men mortgage their property and borrow money from the bank to pay their debts to Sterling?
Sterling has the banker under his thumb.
Oh?
Banker Grundy is afraid to advance funds without Sterling's okay.
Do you think Grundy is working with Sterling?
Everyone in town thinks he is, mister.
Did your brother say what sort of evidence he hoped to get to jail Sterling?
I don't know much about it. Jim suspects that Sterling is wanted for murder in some eastern city.
Do you think Sterling knew why the sheriff went to Pine City?
I'm sure he did. Jim made the mistake of confiding in a few people. They talked, and soon everyone in town knew why he was going to Pine City. And now people are saying that Jim was bribed by John Sterling.
Bribed? Why does anyone think Jim was bribed?
Mr. Grundy, the banker, started the story. He came here this morning and rapped on the door. I was expecting Jim or a message from him. I hurried to the door. I was surprised to see the banker.
Morning, Miss Burton.
Mr. Grundy, good morning. Will you step inside?
Yes. I brought something for you. An Indian came into the bank a little while ago and left this envelope for you.
Oh?
He said he met a man on the trail who gave him the envelope and paid him $2 to bring it to the bank.
Maybe it's a message from Jim explaining why he hasn't returned, but I don't see why he'd send it to the bank.
Probably figured the Indian couldn't find this house.
Money?
Sakes alive.
Brand new $100 bills, 5 of them.
Any message?
No, just the money, $500.
Jim Burton never had that much at one time.
Well, I don't know that this is from Jim.
Hold on. Let me see one of those bills.
Maybe they're counterfeit.
Not by a jugful. They're as good as gold. And they're like the bills I paid out to John Sterling the day before yesterday. He drew $5,000 in paper money like this from his bank account.
5,000?
Yes. And now 500 is sent to you. I'll bet these are the same bills.
But John Sterling would have no reason to send my
He'd
brother...
have plenty of reason to hand over $5,000 to your brother.
What do you mean?
Didn't Jim go to Pine City for evidence that would hang John Sterling?
That's what he said,
And
but...
Sterling knew it. So he drew cash from the bank, met Jim between here and Pine City, and made a deal.
Do you think my brother took a bribe?
Seems obvious to me. Didn't he plan to return the night before last?
Yes,
But he changed his mind when he saw the chance to get rich. He sent you cash in case you needed it. He's got no intention of coming back.
No, Mr. Grundy, you're wrong. Jim would never accept a bribe. And besides, he wouldn't leave his house and furniture for $5,000.
The house is mortgaged to my bank, and the furniture's practically worthless.
But Jim wouldn't have to leave. Even if he did take a bribe, he could return and say he didn't get the evidence.
After all his talk, he didn't dare come back with a pocket full of money and tell a story like that. Better men than Jim have fallen to the temptation of easy money. I know it must be a shock to you, Miss Burton.
Mr. Grundy seemed thoroughly convinced that Jim took a bribe and told his suspicions to everyone he saw.
He's wrong, Miss Burton. I'm as convinced as you are that Jim wouldn't accept a bribe. Did he address the envelope that held the money?
My name was written on it, but I can't be sure it was Jim's handwriting. I'm afraid something has happened to Jim. Sterling might have sent gunmen to kill him.
Have you talked to the deputy sheriff?
Yes, he came here this morning to tell me that Mr. Grundy was spreading the story that Jim took a bribe.
Did the deputy believe it?
No. He said he'd ride to Pine City and try to find some trace of Jim. He should be back tonight.
The Indian who delivered the envelope might know something about your brother.
That's what Hank Yates, the deputy, thought. He said he'd try to find the Indian.
Well, thanks for telling me everything, Miss Burton.
What are you going to do?
I'll try to find your brother.
The Lone Ranger hurried to the side of his horse and gathered up the reins.
Silver, before we do anything else, we'll return to camp and tell Tonto what we've learned. Easy, steady, big fella. Come on, Silver.
As the masked man rode out of town, John Sterling descended a steep flight of stairs to the lantern-lit cellar of his home. The missing sheriff, a prisoner in John Sterling's cellar, was tightly bound to a chair and guarded by two hard-faced men who played cards at a nearby table.
Well, boys, has the sheriff changed his mind about talking?
Nope. Sterling, no matter what you and these two crooks do to me, you'll never get your hands on the evidence that'll hang you.
I never give up, Sheriff.
You don't even know that I've got evidence.
You went to Pine City for it, Sheriff, and you're not one to go on a wild goose chase.
These two polecats searched me when they captured me on my way back from Pine City. They didn't find anything.
What did you do with the evidence? Did you turn it over to someone?
I'm not talking.
Maybe you suspected I'd have men waiting on the trail for you and gave it to someone else to take to your deputy.
Speaking of my deputy, Sterling, by this time he knows something's happened to me. He'll be looking for me. You're not going to get away with holding me prisoner.
Sheriff, let me tell you something. Everyone in town thinks I bribed you to suppress the evidence.
What?
Everyone thinks you took my cash and ran away. Banker Grundy himself started the story. I planned it that way.
Well, you ornery...
Take it easy, Sheriff.
If I could just get free...
There's no use struggling against those ropes. Listen to me, Sheriff. As long as people think as they do, you can't show yourself in town. So why not be smart?
What are you getting at?
Take this cash and go away. Look, $4,500. It's all yours.
If I tell you about the evidence...
Yes, and turn it over to me. Then you'll be free to take your horse from my stable and ride away. Go anywhere you want.
That's a lot of money, Sheriff.
You needn't worry about your sister. She's well provided for. She has her job and also $500 of my money.
My sister has some of your money?
Yes, I sent it to her in care of the banker. Grundy takes orders from me.
You scheming skunk!
$4,500 in cash, Sheriff. What do you say?
Your money's bought a lot of things around here, Sterling. But it won't buy me. And it won't save you from the hangman.
I hope to avoid violence.
I'd give my life before I'd sell out to you.
Would you also give the life of your best friend?
Best friend?
Hank Yates.
Huh? You wouldn't kill him.
He'll be killed, and everyone will think you killed him. Now what do you say?
Hank's a lawman, and he'd rather die than see a crook like you go free. Do what you're a mind to, Sterling. But remember, you're going to hang.
Dude.
Yeah, boss.
Fix yourself up in that Indian outfit you wore when you went to the bank.
You want me to take Mr. Grundy another envelope, supposedly from the sheriff?
No, this time I want you to call on Hank Yates, the deputy.
Right. Is he home?
If he isn't, he will be. He went out of town on business, but left word he'd be back tonight.
What do you want me to tell him?
Deliver a message that will lead him to his death. Here's the way we'll do it.
The curtain falls on the first act of our Lone Ranger adventure. Before the next exciting scenes, please permit us to pause for just a few moments. Now to continue. While the murder plans were discussed in Sterling's cellar, the Lone Ranger joined Tonto in camp and told what he had learned from Mary Burton.
And according to the sister of the sheriff, the deputy sent a posse in search of the Indian, then set out for Pine City.
And what we do?
I'd like to talk to that Indian and find out who gave him the envelope from Mary Burton. Also, I want to talk to the deputy as soon as possible.
Him back from Pine City?
Well, I don't know, Tonto. I'll go to his house, and if he's not there, I'll wait for him. Meanwhile, you try to find the Indian.
Me savvy.
Spend a couple of hours, and if you don't find him, go to Medicine Rock and wait for me. Easy, steady, big fellow. Come on, Silver.
Meanwhile, in the cellar of John Sterling's home, the outlaw known as Dude completed his disguise. Wearing buckskins and with his skin darkened, he stood close to the lantern while Sterling looked him over.
I reckon you'll fool Hank Yates. You know where to take him, dude.
Yep.
We'll be there waiting for you with the sheriff.
Boss, do you think we'd better gag the sheriff before we take him out of the cellar?
Good idea, Red. Gag him while I get his gun and make sure it's loaded.
Yeah, right.
Then we'll get going. Dude, you'd better wait half an hour or so to give us a chance to reach the old shack before you call on Yates.
Right.
A few minutes later, Sheriff Jim Burton was placed on his own horse. Tightly gagged and with his hands tied behind his back, he was forced to ride between Red and Sterling through the darkness toward an old shack in the woods. Dude, wearing the Indian disguise, watched the clock in Sterling's home. About half an hour after the sheriff had been taken away, he decided it was time to start for Hank Yates' home. But the Lone Ranger was already rapping on the deputy's back door. When Yates opened the door and saw the masked man, he reached for his gun.
Hold it, Yates. Don't draw.
Ready. Beat me to it, eh?
I've already called on the sheriff's sister. She knows me as a friend. May I come in?
Well, I reckon you'll do as you want while you hold the gun on me.
I'll holster the gun.
Who are you?
The sheriff called me the Lone Ranger.
Yeah? He's spoken to the Lone Ranger.
I came here to see if you've learned anything about the sheriff while you were in Pine City.
How'd you know I went there?
The sheriff's sister told me.
Did she tell you the talk that's going around about the sheriff taking a bribe?
Yes, but I'm sure that's not true.
Why are you curious about what I learned in Pine City?
I want to find the sheriff. I have something important to discuss with him.
Official business?
Yes.
Discuss it with me. I'm the acting sheriff.
I'd rather talk to the sheriff.
Because you don't trust me?
I don't know you, Yates. I neither trust nor distrust you.
Well, that goes double. I don't know you. So I'm not telling you anything.
But, Yates, the sheriff is my friend. You said he spoke of me,
He
and I...
spoke of the Lone Ranger, but I don't know that you are the Lone Ranger. Anyone can wear a mask. There's it. The front door.
I'll wait here in the kitchen while you see who's there.
Suit yourself. Yeah, just a minute.
How?
An Injun.
You Deputy Yates?
Yes. And I've been hoping to see a certain Injun. Say, by any chance, are you the critter who called on Banker Grundy?
Me same one. Sheriff send me to Banker. Then him send me here to you.
Do you know where Sheriff Burton is?
Me know. Him wanna see you.
Why didn't he come back to town?
Oh, there plenty reason. Him tell you. Him got papers that prove John Sterling murderer.
Yeah?
You go to him. Him give you papers. Me take you there.
Well, where is the sheriff?
In woods. Me show you.
All right, I'll go with you. Wait right there in front of the house. I'll be with you in a minute.
The deputy hurried to rejoin the masked man, but when he reached the kitchen, the back door was open and the man was gone.
Gee, there he goes. Now, why in tarnation did he leave so sudden? Is he an imposter? Is he afraid to meet the sheriff face to face?
With important work at hand, the deputy shrugged off his questions concerning the masked man. He saddled his horse, then directed the waiting man in Indian clothes to lead him to the sheriff. Maintaining his role of an Indian, Dude guided the deputy several miles through the woods to an old cabin that had once been the home of a trapper. Candlelight gleamed through the dirty window.
Is this where I'm to meet the sheriff?
Him inside.
I had a posse searching for you, Injun, but they were working in the woods on the opposite side of town.
You go inside.
Wait a minute, not so fast. If the sheriff is here, where's the horse?
It back a cabin.
I'll take a look.
Don't bother. Don't reach for a gun. You're covered.
Hey, you're not an Injun?
That's right. Hey, boss.
What sort of game is he?
Hello, Yates.
Sterling.
Come in.
You heard the boss. Go inside. And keep your hands at shoulder level.
We'll have all
Go on.
Red, you'd better take the deputy's gun.
Right.
Bewildered by the sudden turn of events, the deputy made no resistance as Red took his gun. His eyes were fixed on the grim-faced sheriff who lay tied and gagged on the floor.
Here, Jim. Jim, what have they done to you?
He can't talk. He's gagged.
Sterling, you and the banker worked this out. You captured the sheriff, then you sent this crook posing as a redskin to call on the banker. To help frame the sheriff so his people would think he'd taken a bribe.
Yes.
And in such a way that there's no proof against you. You're a slick crook.
Deputy, whether the sheriff lives or dies depends on you.
On me.
He went to Pine City for certain evidence against me. Unless you hand over that evidence, the sheriff will be shot.
I haven't got it.
Yates, the sheriff was empty-handed on his way back from Pine City. I think he suspected he might be waylaid and made arrangements for you to receive the evidence.
No, he didn't. I knew he expected to arrest you on an old murder charge, but that's all I know. I don't even know when or where the murder was committed, or who was killed.
Yeah, it sounds like he's telling the truth, boys.
Yes. Well, we'll give the sheriff one more chance to talk. Remove the gag, Red.
Right.
Stand against that wall, deputy.
All right.
There, Sheriff. Now you can talk.
Yates, I'm sorry you're mixed up in this.
Don't worry about me, Sheriff.
Your last chance, Sheriff. Want to talk to save the deputy's life?
I'll say this much, Sterling. That evidence is where you'll never get your hands on it.
I'll get it. You're sacrificing your life and the deputy's for nothing. I'll never hang.
You'll hang higher than a kite. I'm sorry, Yates, but we can't kowtow to these crooks.
You're doggone right. And even if you did give Sterling what he wants, he wouldn't dare let us live. He knows we'd jail him for capturing us.
There's one satisfaction. All three of these crooks will hang for killing us. Red, you and Dude are making a big mistake. Sterling's going to hang anyway, but you
No
don't
one's going to hang. Dude is going to return to town as an Indian and tell how the sheriff sent him for the deputy and give an account of the gunfight that took place when the deputy found out the sheriff planned to run away. Dude will say that the deputy drew a gun to try to stop the sheriff. A fight started and they shot each other.
Oh, got it all worked out, haven't you, Sterling?
Yes. Go ahead, boys. Start shooting.
Hey, the masked man.
Drop the gun.
Shoot him!
Ornery crooks.
The Lone Ranger rushed through the door, firing a split second ahead of Red, whose gun was blasted from his hand. In that instant, the deputy leaped at Dude, throwing him off balance. Dude's shot went harmlessly into the floor.
I've got his gun arm. Drop the gun, Dude, or I'll twist your arm.
All right! Don't shoot me. I'm unarmed.
Get your hands up, Sterling. And you others as well.
In a moment, the fight was over. The three crooks were tightly bound, and the sheriff was released. He grinned and said,
It'll sure spike the story that I took a bribe when I jailed these three crooks.
Well, I knew you weren't bribed, Sheriff. But I couldn't figure what happened to you. I went to Pine City and learned from the postmaster that you got a letter.
Yep. I read it, then burned it before I left there.
Yeah, but what about the evidence against Sterling?
Yates, I told the sheriff in a letter a month ago that I'd have the evidence in his hands on the 1st of this month.
I went to Pine City expecting it by mail.
Instead, there was a letter from me saying I would bring the evidence in person.
What?
That was the letter I burned.
Then you have the evidence.
Yes. Here it is, Sheriff.
Oh, great.
I found out that Sterling was wanted in St. Louis for murder and gathered sufficient evidence to convict him if he's sent back for trial.
And I've got enough evidence on the banker to put him away, too.
Yeah, but, Missy, If you had the evidence, why did you ride away when the fake Indian came to my place?
Because he said that the sheriff wanted to turn the evidence over to you. I knew he lied. The sheriff didn't have the evidence. I suspected a trap, so I followed at a distance.
You were sure a sight for sore eyes when you came charging through that door. I've got a lot to talk over with you, mister.
I'll see you later, Sheriff, after you and Yates have jailed these three. Adios.
Adios. And thanks.
You know, Sheriff, I wasn't sure about that masked man when he called on me. But now, by Sunday, there's no doubt that he's a Lone Ranger.
This is a feature of the Lone Ranger Incorporated, created by George W. Trendle, produced by Trendle Campbell Muir Incorporated, and directed by Charles D. Livingston. Tonight's drama was written by Fran Stryker. The part of the Lone Ranger is played by Brace Beamer.